Why the DAT revival will never happen. Friends, digital audio tape, that's what DAT stands for. In its day, it was revolutionary, but it never really caught on. Was this because it was a bad format, or was there another, more sinister reason for its non-acceptance and downfall? OK, we have to start with a historical perspective. It's August 1963. You, as a 1963 dweller, think that being able to make your own sound recordings would be a good hobby. People did that. They recorded their friends and family singing, reciting poetry, or maybe just having fun. Then they would play the tape back and people would cringe hearing their own voices because they'd never heard them like that before. So in August 1963, you bought a tape recorder. There were many models sold into the domestic market, and I had one. But you bought too soon. You could have waited one more month until September 1963 and bought a compact cassette recorder. So much more convenient, not quite the same sound quality, but destined to become massively popular. And now, if you are of a certain age, you'll remember that cassettes were everywhere. Unless, of course, you had an 8-track cartridge player in your car, which was more of a thing in the USA than the UK. And in 1965 or 1966 in the USA, you could start to replace your vinyl record collection with music cassettes. Yes, that's all one word. It was all very convenient. Convenient. Convenience, that and the fact you could record audio as well as play it back, was all that the compact cassette had going for it. We yearned for something better, and we had to yearn a long, long time. All the way through to 1987, in fact, when digital audio tape made its commercial debut. But I'd heard of DAT a while before that, around 1983 or 84. Some people, I shall not name, who I was talking with were enthusing about a new digital audio recording medium that they could use in military submarines to record the audio environment of the ocean. Not so much for scientific curiosity, I might add, but I'll add no more in case I get a knock on the door from men in dark suits and dark glasses. It transpired that DAT was the cause of this enthusiasm, and the conversation grew more widespread and more relevant to us in pro-audio circles. There was more to DAT than DAT in those days. I'm going to start calling it DAT because that's how we said it. There were SDAT and RDAT, being stationary digital audio tape and rotating digital audio tape. Actually, I remember it as rotary digital audio tape, but that might just be my memory failing. Actually, I'll throw in at this point that it might have been other digital audio recording systems that were exciting the admirals of the Submarine, but I'm pretty sure my conversation was about DAT specifically. I'll cut out what might have been several minutes of video and tell you that the powers that be didn't allow a VHS versus Betamax war to happen, but decided that RDAT was the way to go, and SDAT was dropped. It resurfaced later for a while as digital compact cassette, but that's another story that I'll skip for now because it didn't last long. To describe RDAT briefly, or simply DAT, as it came to be known, the tape was contained in a small cassette, small enough to drop into a cup of coffee, which many people noted, but I've never heard of it actually ever happening. The recorder was like a miniature video recorder with a rotating head. It recorded in 16 bits at a sampling rate of 44.1 or 48 kilohertz. There's lots more I could tell you, but this is the essence. The tape was small and compact, the audio was digital, and the quality was as good as CD, which was DAT's downfall. Let's go back to the compact cassette. What did people do with it? Well, in the early days of tape recording as a hobby, people recorded family and friends doing what family and friends do. Some people recorded music from the radio or TV, most likely through a microphone, because radios and TVs of the time didn't have line outputs. Some people recorded old episodes of Doctor Who, which were thought lost, but survive to this day through their efforts. Of course, in audio only. But at some point it became a thing to use your cassette recorder to copy records, or from your FM radio with a newfangled line output, which of course was totally illegal, and still is illegal in many jurisdictions if you don't otherwise own a legitimate copy. And of course, the record industry hated this. "Home taping is killing music" was their slogan, which of course did absolutely nothing to put people off. But there was a saving grace in this, at least for the record industry. The audio quality of cassettes was poor and only achieved a decent standard if you were prepared to pay a lot of money for a high-quality cassette deck. Deck, yes, that's what we call them, cassette decks. So the whole thing was self-limiting, and vinyl records still sold in their millions. But then came DAT, a cassette recorder with perfect sound quality. I say perfect because if you could copy a CD from a CD player's digital output, the resulting DAT would be a bit-for-bit clone and sound absolutely identical to the CD. And then your friend could bring round their DAT recorder and copy your copy, and it would sound identical. Then there could be a whole chain of DAT owners making copies, all of which would sound absolutely identical to the original CD. The record industry couldn't stand for this. They lobbied DAT manufacturers and the US government to prevent this happening, and they succeeded. The first ever commercially available DAT recorder, the Sony DTC-1000ES, which I bought myself, could not record at 44.1 kHz, the CD sampling rate, only 48 kHz. Actually, I bought a modified version which could record at 44.1 kHz. My reason was to make masters for CD release, and I could put my hand on my heart and say that I never copied a CD. No, there's no sarcasm emoji. I never copied a CD. But regular DAT machines in their various brands and models could not record at 44.1 kHz. So if you wanted to copy a CD, you would have to copy it in the analog domain. So there would be a small loss of quality. To be honest, this loss of quality would be so small that you could probably copy 10 generations without anyone noticing the difference. But the record industry had more guns to fire. Serial Copy Management System, SCMS. Some people pronounced it SCUMS. This was mandated by the Audio Home Recording Act of 1992 in the USA, that every DAT recorder sold in the USA had to have SCMS. And of course, what happens in the USA happens in the rest of the world, so we all had to put up with it. Basically, SCMS would let you make one digital copy of a CD or pre-recorded DAT, but that copy would then be flagged as uncopyable, so you couldn't make another digital copy from that copy. I'm simplifying a bit, but not much. What a load of tripe. SCMS was appeasement for the record industry, nothing more. Anyone with a CD player that had a digital output and a DAT recorder could make as many copies as they liked. Each copy would be uncopyable, but if you bought 1,000 blank tapes, you could make 1,000 copies and sell them illegally anywhere you liked. So the whole SCMS thing was pointless. Except that it worked. It put the kiss of death on DAT, that and a tax on blank tapes. It doesn't take much to kill a new format. Sow seeds of doubt in the public's minds, and they won't buy. And they didn't buy. DAT recorders sold well into the pro audio market, and at one time it was the most common mastering format for CD release. But for consumers, it was a great big no. And for consumers, using their computers to copy CDs was just around the corner. And then Napster, then Rip, Mix, Burn, then history as we know it. So DAT went. It's now gone, and it's sadly missed. Or is it? Well, yes, it is gone. There's absolutely no reason to own a DAT machine today, unless you have an archive of old tapes that you want to preserve. Other than that, neither consumer nor audio professional needs DAT now. But to be honest, although DAT was a fantastic leap forward in its day, it wasn't perfect. You had to remember not to record during the first minute of the tape, or you'd get glitching. Not always, and not usually for the whole minute, but many times you would regret starting your recording from zero. The same would apply to the last minute, but DAT tapes, in my experience, always had a couple of minutes to spare. That was just an irritation. More significant was that I found that I couldn't reliably transport a tape from one machine to another. So, if I recorded on one DAT machine and played back on another, I could get glitching. This wasn't universal, but it happened too often. And while clearly noticeable glitching is one thing, barely noticeable glitching is totally another. You had to worry the whole time whether the machine had glitched and you hadn't noticed. And if you did notice, then there wasn't anything you could do about it. In my experience, DAT machines that had a vari-speed feature didn't glitch. You could play any tape from anywhere on them, probably because they had more precise tape handling. I don't mean that you had to use the vari-speed, just that it needed to be present. So when you took your homemade DAT master to a mastering studio, they would have a machine of sufficient quality to play it, glitch-free, no doubts. But that's about it. Had DAT gone on longer, the glitching problem would have been solved and we would have had a reliable format. But it didn't need to go on. Computer audio was just around the corner, and it solved another problem that DAT had. You couldn't edit. Yes, you could shell out an awful lot of money for 2 DAT machines and an edit controller, but on one DAT you couldn't edit. I remember one album I made where tracks that didn't need editing were mastered directly to DAT. Tracks that needed editing were mastered to my Revox PR99 tape recorder, edited, then copied to DAT. I'm going to leave it there. DAT was a great step forward in its time, but is now totally irrelevant, even to nostalgia. DAT survives only in archives and in history. It's a fun story, but this is where it ends. See you soon.